In 2009, Eddie Curry's ex-girlfriend, Nova Henry, and her 10-month-old daughter, Ava, were brutally murdered in their South Loop, Chicago townhouse. Nova's 3-year-old son, Noah, miraculously escaped harm. He was found alone with their bodies and was able to tell police what happened. The killer was Frederick Goings, a 36-year-old attorney who'd once represented Nova in a paternity case against Curry. He'd become romantically involved with her, but the relationship was dangerously unstable. Nova even secured a protective order in 2007, only to cancel it days later. By January 24, 2009, Goings had crossed every line. Evidence showed Nova was holding little Ava when Goings shot them both. Surveillance footage placed his vehicles near the townhouse in the days before the murders, and gunshot residue in his car sealed his connection. Goings fled to Michigan City, Indiana, where he was calmly spotted using a hotel pool and laundry. At his 2013 trial, Goings denied all charges, but the jury convicted him in under 4 hours. He's serving life without parole. The judge condemned him as a predator. Custody of Noah was awarded to Eddie Curry. In the aftermath, Nova's mother transformed her grief into activism against domestic violence, determined that no one else endures what Nova couldn't escape. Robert Swift went straight from high school to the NBA when the Supersonics drafted him 12th overall in 2004. At over 7 feet tall, he looked like a future star, but by 21, injuries derailed his career. A torn ACL cost him an entire season, and a follow-up meniscus tear kept him off the court again. Seattle declined to re-sign him in 2009, and he quietly slipped out of the league. Swift had earned about $11 million, but financial trouble hit fast. He bought a mansion in Samish, Washington in 2006, only to stop making payments by 2011. When the house went into foreclosure, he refused to leave, and by 2013, photos revealed a wrecked property. Broken glass, spoiled food, holes in the walls, heroin needles, guns, and ammo everywhere. In 2014, police raided a Seattle home where Swift was living. Inside they found heroin, meth, stolen electronics, sawed-off shotguns, AR-15s, handguns, and thousands of rounds of ammo. He admitted to using heroin and squatting there. In April 2015, Swift pled guilty to possessing an illegal short-barreled shotgun and received 1 year in prison plus 3 years supervised release. Since his 2016 release, Swift has worked to stay clean and reconnect with basketball, coaching youth teams and playing locally, but the NBA stage remains behind him. His story is a stark reminder of how quickly promise can unravel without the right support. Keon Clark's spiral. On paper, Keon Clark looked like a solid NBA role player. Drafted 13th overall in 1998, he bounced between Denver, Toronto, Sacramento, and Utah, averaging 8 points, nearly 6 rebounds, and swats galore. But off the stat sheet was the bottle. Clark later confessed he never played sober, downing half to a full pint of gin daily, even sneaking sips at halftime. That dependence started in high school and quickly turned into daily blackouts. After his NBA career ended, fame and money only fueled the fire. By 2006, he was facing drug and gun charges and skipped court appearances, earning a 30-month sentence, later overturned on appeal due to bad legal counsel. The trouble didn't stop. In 2013, Clark pled guilty to weapons and DUI charges from the previous year, a loaded gun found during parole checks, and a drunk driving crash into a telephone pole. That landed him 8 years in an Illinois prison. He served 4 and walked free in July 2017. Now back in his hometown of Danville, Clark is working to piece his life back together. He's openly owned how far he fell and is committed to turning things around. His story isn't just a cautionary NBA tale, it's what happens when addiction takes hold without real support. The talent was there, but the pain ran deeper. Rodney Rogers' comeback from tragedy. Rodney Rogers enjoyed a 13-year NBA career, earning 6th Man of the Year in 2000 and racking up about $27 million playing for Denver, LA Clippers, Phoenix, Boston, New Jersey, New Orleans, and Philadelphia. But in 2008, a single ATV accident in rural North Carolina changed everything. He shattered his 3rd cervical vertebra and bruised the 4th, leaving him paralyzed from the shoulders down. Doctors gave him only a 5% chance of regaining movement. He required a ventilator and extensive rehabilitation at costs topping $400,000 a year, and now relies on a head-controlled power wheelchair and full daily care. Despite the physical and emotional toll, including depression and suicidal thoughts, Rogers found strength in his fiancée, Faye Suggs. He launched a foundation to support spinal injury survivors and became a motivational speaker, transforming personal tragedy into a mission of hope. In 2024, he sued Blue Cross Blue Shield of North Carolina for denying medically necessary in-home nursing care, highlighting the ongoing battle for proper support. Today, Rogers continues advocating for accessible care and raising awareness, proving that resilience and purpose can outlast even the toughest setbacks. Nicky Van Exel's 2010 conviction. In 2010, Nicky Maxwell Van Exel, son of former NBA guard Nick Van Exel, was found guilty of murdering his best friend, Bradley A.O. Basio, inside his Garland, Texas home. Prosecutors say the killing was cold and calculated. A.O. was slated to testify about a string of armed robberies the two committed in Houston earlier that year. 10 days before that testimony, Nicky used a 12-gauge shotgun to end A.O.'s life. Instead of panicking, he methodically covered his tracks, wrapping A.O.'s body in plastic, tossing it into his SUV, dumping it at Lake Ray Hubbard, then returning home to clean up the blood and discard the shotgun in a North Dallas creek. Court documents showed premeditation, and what began as a capital murder indictment was reduced to murder when his defense claimed the shooting was a tragic accident during roughhousing. The jury wasn't convinced. After just 2.5 hours of deliberation, they convicted him. On February 1st, 2013, Nicky received a 60-year prison sentence. He'll be eligible for parole after 30 years. During sentencing, Nick Van Exel addressed A.O.'s family, expressing profound sorrow and imploring that no one endure such betrayal. A.O.'s mother, Unyunesia Kwao, spoke of her heartbreak. She'd loved Nicky like a son, and now in the hush of the courtroom, all that remained was grief. Greg Oden's 2014 arrest. In the early hours of August 7, 2014, Lawrence, Indiana police responded to a domestic violence call at a residence tied to former NBA center Greg Oden. Around 3:30 a.m., officers found Oden's ex-girlfriend with visible facial injuries, swelling, cuts, and blood on the furniture, and a knocked-over flower pot in the room. A witness, the victim's best friend, told police that Oden had punched her in the face. Oden didn't dispute the account. He admitted to the altercation and expressed regret. Initially, he faced 2 misdemeanor battery charges, but by August 11th, prosecutors upgraded the case. He was charged with felony battery causing serious bodily injury, plus 2 misdemeanor counts, domestic battery and battery causing injury. In December 2014, Oden accepted a plea deal, pleading guilty to the felony charge in exchange for the dismissal of the 3 misdemeanors. In February 2015, the court sentenced him to 999 days of probation, a $200 fine, and mandatory domestic violence and alcohol counseling, 26 weeks each. He was also issued a no-contact order, barring any communication with the victim. At the time, Oden was a free agent recovering from chronic knee injuries that had already derailed his once promising NBA career. This arrest only deepened the personal and professional downturn of a player once touted as a future league superstar. In 2011, Derrick Rose was the NBA's MVP and face of the Bulls, until an ESPN The Magazine interview stirred up a storm. Asked to rate the league's PED problem on a scale of 1 to 10, Rose allegedly answered 7, calling it huge, and demanding a level playing field where nobody has that advantage. The reaction was immediate. Media headlines splashed with PED accusations, fans debated locker room rumors, and the NBA's clean image PR took a hit. Rose and the Bulls quickly backpedaled. He claimed he didn't recall the question and must have misunderstood, insisting he didn't believe there was a PED issue in the league. ESPN held firm, though, stating the interview took place in November 2010 and that the quote was accurate and in context. No clarification followed from Rose, nor did ESPN issue a correction. The 7 rating and Rose's denial remained in the public record, leaving fans torn between trusting the league's official stance or wondering what really happens when the jerseys come off. Shawn Kemp's off-court life has been rocky. In 2005, cops in Shoreline, Washington, pulled him over after smelling weed wafting from his parked car. A search turned up about 60 grams of marijuana, some cocaine, and a semi-automatic pistol. He eventually pleaded guilty to possessing over 40 grams of pot. A year later in Houston, Kemp got busted again, this time for driving without a license plate. The officer caught the scent of burning marijuana and found just under 2 ounces during the search. He was charged with a misdemeanor and released on a $500 bond. Then in 2023, Kemp tracked a stolen cell phone to a Tacoma Mall parking lot, where a violent confrontation erupted and shots were fired. Kemp says he was shot at first and returned fire in self-defense. No charges came immediately, but on April 14, 2024, he was hit with first-degree assault charges. He pleaded not guilty in May, with his lawyers arguing he was protecting himself against people with criminal pasts. His trial is set for May 27, 2025. From all-star highs to a string of arrests and now a serious felony case, Kemp's post-NBA journey has been anything but smooth. His next chapter hinges on that upcoming trial. Anthony Grundy enjoyed a respectable professional basketball career, even earning a spot in the NBA, but his life took a dark turn after he left the court for good. In 2011, Grundy was arrested in Wake County, North Carolina, for his fourth DWI. Rather than face the charges, he fled the country and resurfaced in Ghana, effectively evading U.S. justice for 6 years. His attempt to return in 2017 through New York's JFK Airport ended badly. Federal authorities arrested him on arrival, and he was later convicted of felony DWI, multiple counts of failing to appear in court, and probation violations. A judge sent him to prison for 2 years, finally catching up to the runaway athlete. Freedom was short-lived. In June 2019, Grundy struck a 59-year-old woman with his vehicle on Louisville's Dixie Highway, then drove away. 8 days later, he turned himself in and admitted he'd been driving without a license, insurance, or valid plates. The woman succumbed to her injuries, and Grundy faced the weight of a fatal hit and run. 5 months after that crash, on November 14, 2019, Grundy was stabbed during a domestic dispute on Muhammad Ali Boulevard in Louisville. He was rushed to the hospital, but died at just 40 years old. Grundy's post-basketball life was beset by legal troubles, reckless decisions, and a tragic end. An all-too-common reminder of the challenges athletes can face once the spotlight fades and the game is over. Michael Ray Richardson burst onto the scene as the 4th overall pick in 1978, quickly proving himself as one of the league's premier playmakers. By 1980, he was leading the NBA in assists, topped the steal charts 3 times, and earned 4 All-Star nods. His resilience even won him the Comeback Player of the Year award in 1985 after he'd entered treatment for substance abuse. But between 1983 and 1986, Richardson failed 3 drug tests for cocaine. On June 25, 1986, Commissioner David Stern leveled the NBA's toughest punishment under its anti-drug policy, a lifetime ban. Richardson became the first active player to be permanently expelled, a stark warning to the rest of the league. Rather than walk away from the game, he took his talents overseas, spending the next decade and a half playing in Italy, Croatia, and France until 2002. He then transitioned into coaching stints in the CBA and Canada's NBL, even guiding teams to championships. In 2023, Richardson laid it all bare in his memoir Banned, chronicling his rise, his fall, and the road to redemption. Today he runs youth clinics, teaches kindergarten, and co-owns a beauty salon with his wife, proof that even when the NBA door closed, he found new courts on which to leave his mark. In September 2013, a Houston nightclub set the stage for an all-too-familiar NBA saga when Steven Jackson, who was performing under his rap moniker Stack 5, found himself in an unexpected scuffle with Steve Francis. Mid-performance, Francis appeared behind Jackson, and before anyone could fully grasp what was happening, Jackson had his hand pressed against Francis's throat. The incident was caught on video, and grainy clips of the 2 ex-pros trading aggression in front of a packed crowd made the rounds online. Social media buzzed, but remarkably, no one was arrested or charged. Jackson later dropped by ESPN's Highly Questionable to unpack the drama, insisting there was no long-standing beef. He and Francis had never been close, never moved in the same circles, and Jackson was simply taken off guard. Francis never offered a public retort, and both men quietly moved on. Still, the episode became a textbook example of how life after basketball can spiral when old reputations and raw pride collide under the glare of a different kind of spotlight. It didn't derail either man's career or land them in court, but it did serve as a reminder. No matter how far you step off the court, the frenzy can follow you anywhere. William Bedford entered the NBA at 7 feet tall and 215 pounds, the 6th overall pick in 1986. He looked like a surefire big man. He even snagged a spot on Detroit's 1990 championship squad. But off the court, Bedford was slipping. Drugs pulled him away from basketball, and soon he was out of the league altogether. By 2001, Michigan police caught him hauling 25 pounds of marijuana. A couple of years later, he was arrested again, this time for cocaine possession with intent to distribute, and handed a 10-year prison sentence. Inside, Bedford faced threats, violence, and the brutal reality of life behind bars. Imagine going from the roar of the finals to fighting for survival in a prison cell. When he was released in 2011, Bedford made a conscious choice to rebuild. He spent the last decade mentoring young players, warning them how quickly a dream can crumble and how hard it is to climb back up once you hit rock bottom. His story doesn't end neatly, but now he uses those hard-earned lessons to steer others away from the same fall. Deion Smith's rise to the NBA was forged by raw talent and a turbulent childhood. Removed from his home at age 5 and raised in foster care, he blossomed into a Chicago high school star, pouring in over 25 points and grabbing 14 rebounds per game. The Spurs selected him 29th overall in 1999, then immediately flipped him to the Mavericks, only for Smith's NBA dream to derail almost as quickly as it began. Refusing assignments to the minors or overseas, Smith demanded a spot on Dallas's roster, creating friction that limited his opportunities. In November of that year, his off-court struggles reached a crisis. Battling severe mental health issues, he smashed a car window with a rock and swallowed roughly 250 aspirin in a suicide attempt. Hospitalized in a psychiatric ward, Smith's troubles continued after release, arrested twice in 24 hours for threatening his ex-girlfriend and property damage. Dallas suspended him, then bought out his contract for $1.2 million, paid over 10 years. By February 2000, he was a free agent. Smith never stopped chasing a comeback, logging stints in minor leagues and brief looks with Atlanta and Seattle. Yet his story underscores a harsh reality. The NBA spotlight can blindside players unprepared for life's pressures, and without the right support, raw ability alone isn't enough to sustain a career. Talent brought him to the league. The absence of care kept him from staying. Darius Miles entered the NBA as a teenage phenom and walked away with about $62 million in career earnings. But by 2016, he was tagging up for bankruptcy. His assets barely hit $460,000, while debts swelled beyond $1.5 million, including nearly $300,000 owed to the IRS. Bad investments and tangled legal issues, including a 2011 airport arrest at Lambert St. Louis International when security found a loaded gun in his carry-on, drained him dry. Yet the toughest loss wasn't financial. In 2018, Miles poured his heart out in the Players' Tribune, revealing a battle with crippling depression after his mother's death. For the first time, he spoke openly about feeling untethered once basketball, the anchor of his life, was gone. Refusing to fade away, Miles reinvented himself. Since 2019, he's co-hosted the Knuckleheads podcast with Quentin Richardson, inviting NBA voices to share rookie memories, career highs, and personal struggles. The show gave him a new platform and a new sense of purpose. Miles' journey cuts deep, a reminder that even vast talent and wealth can't shield you from life's storms, and that finding footing after the final buzzer can be the hardest game of all. Luther Wright was a 7'2" rookie sensation when the Utah Jazz picked him 18th overall in 1993, but his NBA journey unraveled almost immediately. By January 1994, Wright's world had collapsed. He was found at a Salt Lake City rest stop, smashing garbage cans and denting car windows. That breakdown sent him into psychiatric care, where he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Soon after, the Jazz released him. What followed was a descent few could imagine. Wright battled substance abuse, found himself homeless on the streets, and even lost 2 toes to frostbite while trying to survive winter nights without shelter. From NBA locker rooms to sleeping rough, he faced each day with no safety net. Redemption came in the most unexpected place, a church. In Linden, New Jersey, the Morning Star Community Christian Center became his anchor. There, he discovered community support and a reason to keep fighting. Wright poured his story into his memoir, A Perfect Fit, laying bare his mental health struggles, his fall, and his determination to find peace. Luther Wright's saga isn't about a basketball comeback, it's about clawing back from the edge of nowhere. Though he never returned to the NBA, he's still here, sharing his journey, advocating for mental health, and proving that survival itself can be the greatest victory. Melvin Turpin was a college legend at Kentucky, an NCAA All-American who powered the Wildcats to the 1984 Final Four. Drafted 6th overall that year by the Washington Bullets and immediately dealt to the Cleveland Cavaliers, he arrived in the NBA with sky-high expectations for his 7-foot frame. But constant battles with his weight limited his 5-year pro career in Cleveland, Utah, and back in Washington. He averaged a respectable 8.5 points and nearly 5 rebounds, yet never became the dominant force many predicted. After basketball, Turpin settled into a quieter life, working security, most notably at the University of Kentucky Hospital, where colleagues remembered him as gentle, courteous, and reserved about his hoops past. Then, on July 8, 2010, his world ended in heartbreaking fashion. Turpin was found in his Lexington home, the victim of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. He was just 49. The coroner ruled it a suicide, and no note was ever released. His passing stunned the Kentucky basketball family, a stark reminder that life after the final buzzer can be its toughest opponent, and that even the brightest careers can mask profound, silent struggles. Walter Davis was the embodiment of smooth scoring in the late 70s and 80s, a six-time All-Star, the face of the Suns, and a mid-range maestro. Yet beneath those silky jumpers lay a struggle that would eventually become impossible to conceal. In December 1985, just days after dropping 43 points on the Warriors, Davis made headlines again, but this time for checking himself into a rehab facility in Pasadena. He openly admitted his battle with cocaine and alcohol, spending 29 days in treatment before returning to the court in January 1986. His comeback was strong, but the demons weren't gone. By April 1987, he had relapsed and checked back into rehab. That same year, as the NBA grappled with a growing drug scandal, Davis's own testimony helped bring other Suns players under indictment. Although he faced no criminal charges, he was suspended without pay for the season's final game under the league's strict drug policy, where a third violation could mean a lifetime ban. Phoenix gave him one more season, but recurring back issues and the weight of the controversy took their toll, and after 1987-88, he was released. Davis wrapped up his playing days with Denver and Portland, retiring in 1992. True to his character, he later returned to Phoenix as a broadcaster and scout, helping to shape the franchise he'd once led. In 1994, the Suns retired his number 6, and in 2024, basketball's highest honor arrived, a posthumous Hall of Fame induction. Walter Davis's career reminds us that on-court grace doesn't always translate to life off it, and that the greatest battles are often the ones no one else can see. Chris Gatling was once an NBA All-Star celebrated for his hustle and smooth mid-range game, but after hanging up his sneakers, he traded the hardwood for headlines of a far darker sort. In late 2017, Gatling was sentenced to 2.5 years in federal prison for orchestrating a telemarketing scam that preyed on elderly Arizonans. Between October 2014 and February 2015, he sold fake, passive income website packages to 12 seniors, some of whom emptied life savings, collecting over $155,000 before spending it all on clothes, restaurants, and entertainment. A judge ordered him to repay $167,000 and serve 3 years probation upon release. This wasn't Gatling's first run-in with the law. In 2013, he pleaded guilty to theft and forgery after illegally living in and attempting to sublet a Paradise Valley home he didn't own, earning 4 years probation. Gatling's fall from NBA hopeful to courtroom defendant underscores how quickly life after the game can spiral when the structure and support of professional sports vanish, and how a once bright spotlight can turn into long shadows of regret. Terry Furlow was just 25 and coming off the best season of his young NBA career when tragedy struck. On May 23, 1980, he was pushing his 1979 Mercedes-Benz at around 120 miles per hour on Interstate 71 near Lindale, Ohio, far beyond the speed limit. He lost control, slammed into a utility pole, and was killed instantly. The autopsy revealed he'd been fighting his own demons, cocaine and Valium in his bloodstream, open beer cans and marijuana strewn throughout the car. Just weeks earlier, Furlow had wrapped up a breakout year with the Utah Jazz, averaging 16 points and 4 assists over 55 games in 1979-80 after stints with Philadelphia, Cleveland, and Atlanta. A Michigan State alum, he'd led the Big Ten in scoring his senior year, and teammates trusted his fearless drives to the rim. But substance use was already a cancer in the league, and Furlow's death became one of the earliest high-profile warnings of how deep the problem ran. Magic Johnson, one of his closest friends, stood as a pallbearer at his funeral. For those who knew Furlow or watched him light up the court, the loss hit like a punch to the gut. Here was a rising star who never got the chance to see how far he could soar. His basketball journey began like a fairy tale. A record-shattering high school scorer in North Carolina who eclipsed Michael Jordan's prep marks and became the nation's top recruit. But by 2004, his story had already derailed. He was arrested in a drug sting and hit with multiple felony counts for marijuana distribution, costing him his UNC scholarship. He landed at Oklahoma State, played well enough to get picked 51st overall by the Bulls in 2007, yet never laced up for Chicago. Instead, his name grew more familiar in police blotters than box scores. Over the years, he was arrested 13 times, from a 2008 Boise bust for public urination and resisting arrest to a 2014 Oklahoma stop for weed possession and giving officers false information. Those are just two examples in a string of run-ins, mostly drug and conduct violations, that became his defining stat line. When he finally broke into the NBA in 2010 with the Clippers, it lasted exactly 3.9 seconds, the shortest career in league history. After that, he chased his shot overseas and in the minors, but never stuck. A 2017 car wreck, after he reached for a dropped phone, left him with broken ribs and a fractured back, crushing any hope of another comeback. Today he works as a truck driver and youth coach, striving to give back and rebuild. But those 13 arrests still echo louder than his high school glory ever did. What might have been a career about piling up points became a cautionary tale of missed chances and unrealized promise. Len Elmore wasn't just another 7-footer roaming the paint in the 1970s. He was one of the rare players brave enough to call out the NBA's dirty secret. He saw firsthand how cocaine and other substances coursed through locker rooms like a badge of honor, used casually and with virtually no oversight. Wealth, fame, and stress made the league a powder keg, and Elmore's warnings about addiction and recklessness fell on deaf ears until careers started crumbling. His insider testimony helped reveal that the NBA's glittering golden era masked a serious drug problem, one the league wouldn't begin to tackle until the next decade, after far too many promising talents had already been lost. If you enjoyed this, I'm going to be posting a lot here. I would greatly appreciate it if you could subscribe. Thanks for watching.